What's going on, guys? Welcome back to #AskGSM here today, episode 341 for Wednesday, June 10th, 2020. I am Graham GSM Matthews. Hope you guys are doing well. A ton of questions to get to here today. No time to waste. If you want to send in a question to the show, you could do so by tweeting me on the Twitter machine at WrestleRant with the #AskGSM. Find me on Facebook as well, facebook.com/Graham.GSM.Matthews on the post that I usually put up on Tuesday nights, if not on the wall itself. And last but certainly not least, drop your question down below in the comment section on this very video. I'll include your question in next week's edition. Now, I did notice today that I was notified of someone's YouTube comment question from last week. I think it was Joe's, but I was not notified of Elena the Wise question. So I have no idea why YouTube is not notifying me of certain comments and whatever. Like, it's not even that they won't show up on my phone. They won't even show up on my YouTube my YouTube notifications on the actual website. I don't know why that's happening. So I usually go back and check last week's video anyway before I put together the questions. I forgot to do that last week, and Emmanuel sent in a few questions about Dark Side of the Ring and Owen and a few other related topics in regards to that I did not get to because I didn't see it until after I recorded that episode. So if I missed them, I apologize. Usually, if you send in a question that I have not already answered in recent memory with the #AskGSM either on Facebook, Twitter, or YouTube, direct it at me. I mean, don't just send it in with the hashtag. Definitely tweet it at me. Put it on my Facebook or here on the YouTube video. I will normally see it, but there are instances where I either forget to check or I'm not notified of your question, comment, whatever. So just a heads up. But speaking of Emmanuel, we'll start with his questions that he sent in for last week. I apologize to Emmanuel again. His first question was, Dark Side of the Ring and Martha Hart on Talk is Jericho touched on it, but did you know Owen Hart did not initially want to be a wrestler? It's one of those things that I feel like I was ignorant about growing up because I used to assume the quote-unquote good wrestlers were the ones who actively wanted to be wrestlers. Reading about people like Owen who fell into wrestling out of circumstance and obligation instead of active passion is how I learned it's not as black and white. I did not know that, actually. I know I listened to Martha Hart Talk as Jericho. I watched The Dark Side of the Ring, of course. We talked about it a couple of weeks ago here in the show. I knew none of that, so I was very interested to read your comment about that. I did not know that. I must have missed it on the show and the podcast. But yeah, you're right. Not everyone who, grew up watching wrestling is, going to be all that good. I think we have this notion in our mind, because usually it is true, that the lifelong fans are the best ones out there, like a Punk or a Bryan, people who, dedicated their entire life to this profession. That's not always the case. There are some people who have not been wrestling since day one, or have always aspired to be a professional wrestler, that came into this thing and are already very, very good. Matt Riddle probably being one of the top people I can think of. I'm sure there's more. I know there's more. Matt Riddle, off the top of my head, is one person. Did not always aspire to be a professional wrestler. He kind of fell into it. I mean, he did not start watching wrestling until 2014, until WrestleMania 30. Saw it as something he may want to do, and the guy is already amazing. And I know he was already kind of involved in a combat sport, but it wasn't professional wrestling. So, and he's far from the only one. There are many other people who, kind of fell into it out of circumstance, wanted to try it, and are already very, very good. And there are some people that, again, have been doing this, have wanted to do this since they were little, and they also are not that good. So it kind of goes both ways, but I did not know that about Owen Hart. I know it's not really a question, but I did find that interesting. Emmanuel's second question / comment here. This is going to be an awkward question, but did you ever think about how Owen Hart, Eddie Guerrero, and Chris Benoit became this trinity of wrestling deaths? They all died while active performers for WWE, and they all had tribute episodes on Raw. I guess I think about it because I was able to follow the latter two when they happened, and the first one was literally the year that I was born in 1999, which I feel like has given me this odd curiosity towards Owen and his death and how he influenced things. You are absolutely right. It's not an awkward question. You are absolutely right. When I think of horrible wrestling deaths and stuff like that, or the most memorable, I hate to say memorable as if it's a good thing, but when you ask me, what are the top 3 biggest wrestling deaths? Now, I guess some people could say the Von Erichs. Obviously, that's very well documented. That also had an entire episode of Dark Side of the Ring dedicated to it from season 1. But, I mean, that was so long ago. I think when you say, what are the top 2 biggest wrestling deaths in the last decade or two. I would say, obviously, Benoit from '07, because it really changed the business. Eddie Guerrero's did as well with the whole wellness policy. They already had the wellness policy by the time that Benoit died, but, they issued, or rather incorporated the PG rating soon after. I'm not saying that they were, in correlation with one another, the Benoit incident and the PG rating, but it really did, for a lot of people, mark the end of a certain era in WWE. I would argue that the Ruthless Aggression era ended in '05, but some people would say it ended around 2007. And then the PG era, I fucking hate the era shit, like defining each time period in the company by an era. Thankfully, we have since moved away from that, it feels like. There's no era. There's no new era. There's no old era. The Attitude Era makes sense. Maybe the 80s with the Rock and Wrestling era. In the last 15 years, I would say we have not been living in a certain era, because every year, it feels like, in WWE specifically, is vastly different than the one that came before it and the one that comes after it, for the most part, in my opinion. But going back to your question, Eddie's, Chris's in the last 15 years. Eddie's, when most people ask, what wrestling death hit you the hardest? A lot of people would say Eddie Guerrero. I was not watching at that point, so I can't say Eddie or even Benoit. I started watching soon after Benoit died, and that whole thing happened. Owen Hart as well. The guy died tragically. I guess some people may say Brian Pillman. He died. I don't know if he died while he was with WWE. I'm pretty sure he did, didn't he? I don't remember exactly, but that was a pretty big one in the late 90s as well. I'm trying to think of who else. Obviously, there's been a lot more, like Ultimate Warriors a couple of years ago was pretty big. Savages was pretty big. Those were like heart attack, car accidents, but they weren't active in the company when they died, as, Benoit, Owen, and Eddie were. I think those were the most tragic, just because Owens could have been easily avoided, obviously. That wasn't like, it was a drug thing. Benoit's was so many different factors, and they obviously talked about it on the Dark Side of the Ring thing. Not that it could have been avoided, but that there was just a lot going on there. With Eddie's, I don't know, really, on that Dark Side of the Ring dedicated to Benoit, they didn't really get into what exactly killed Eddie aside from the heart failure, the heart attack, whatever. They didn't say, they kind of made it sound like he had been doing it up until the day that he died, or it may have just been years and years of abuse that his heart took from all the drugs that he was taking earlier on in his life. They didn't really specify what the issue was there and what killed him. I'm not sure if that could have been avoided, but either way, I completely agree. When you say, and again, it sounds bad, but I agree. When you say holy trinity of wrestling deaths, I would argue it is Benoit, it's Eddie, and it's Owen. His third question here, should Owen Hart be in the WWE Hall of Fame? I'm separating this question by itself because I started to realize how long-winded I was getting with my exposition again. So for convenience sake, you can just read the above sentence to answer, but the paragraph below is just background information about why I'm asking. So this is what he said. He said, I used to think Martha Hart had this bitter anti-wrestling stance, and that was why Owen was never allowed in the WWE Hall of Fame. I remember looking up her Broken Hearts, The Life and Death of Owen Hart biography, and finding excerpts, that tended to be dismissive of wrestling, i.e. calling it a freak show, etc. Though it seems now that it's more of an anti-WWE stance. Matter of fact, I found out Martha has approved of Owen getting inducted into a Hall of Fame, the George Tragos / Luthez Hall of Fame in 2018. There's even a photo of her posing with the plaque they sent her. I bring that up because, admittedly, I really did used to believe in the narrative that Martha wanted nothing to do with wrestling and wanted to bury Owen's connection to it, but knowing more about Martha's feelings towards her husband and her work has recontextualized how I think about the discussion. Dude, I completely agree. I'm pretty sure we did talk about this a couple of weeks ago here on the show, but she makes it very clear on the podcast, on Dark Side of the Ring. It's very much, she's not a wrestling fan, per se, but, she even said to Jericho, when Jericho brought it up, that she would be willing to do something for Owen in, New Japan, because he spent a lot of years of his career over there, so that would be kind of cool. He is in various Hall of Fames, wrestling Hall of Fames, that are way more legitimate than WWE's, because they are an actual Hall of Fame. So it's not a fuck wrestling type of thing, it's a fuck WWE type of thing, and rightfully so. I completely agree with you. I feel bad for not educating myself sooner. I mean, granted, she wasn't doing many interviews. I know she had her biography that you said, but she wasn't doing as many interviews and being as public about it as she is now. in regards to why Owen shouldn't be and isn't in the Hall of Fame. And now I completely get it. And as I've said before, I also completely agree that Owen, for her sake and for her kid's sake, should not be in the Hall of Fame. Should he be? Of course. From a wrestling standpoint, from a career standpoint, of course he deserves to be in their Hall of Fame. The thing is, it goes well beyond the politics of a dumb Hall of Fame that doesn't even physically exist. This guy died on their watch because of their negligence or what have you, and now they have to deal with the consequences of that because her husband, their father, is no longer here because of WWE. Was it an accident? Of course. But at the same time, it was an accident that could have easily been avoided. It was a dumb stunt. And it sounds like from the aftermath of the event that company deserves no recognition of Owen Hart's career whatsoever. So they could put his matches on the network, on their YouTube channel, put up pictures of him, put out the fucking DVD release, which I think they did a couple of years ago. I haven't really heard much about that in recent years. But I think they put out a Best of Owen Hart DVD a while ago, didn't they? Either way, this company does not deserve to have a Hall of Fame. And as she said, it's all about the money. I mean, we've known about this for years. It's all about selling tickets and the money goes in their pockets. Let's say if they put him in the Hall of Fame and all the proceeds from the Hall of Fame in terms of ticket sales and stuff like that went to the Owen Hart Foundation that she founded, then maybe. Otherwise, there's no point. Just to have his name on a plaque on a fucking website, there's absolutely no point. So I completely agree with Martha in that respect. Elena the Y from YouTube, their first question was, or only question rather, without going too much into it, I haven't been feeling well mentally the past month, which has started to affect how I watch wrestling, especially WWE Raw, especially WWE, excuse me. Raw might have been alright this week, but to tell the truth, I already lost patience when they did the rivals reluctantly team up and aren't good at coexisting, but still win against other teams anyway, bit with Charlotte and Asuka. I know it's over dramatic, but I stopped watching. I'm so sick of the can they coexist angle, and I'm so sick of Charlotte's omnipresence. I don't know what that word means, despite the fact I'm a journalism major. I'm assuming it means overexposure. But nonetheless, do you have any recommendations for stuff worth watching? Because WWE ain't it right now. Even NXT TakeOver in Your House felt underwhelming on Sunday. I enjoyed TakeOver a lot. I thought it was a very good show considering the circumstances of there being no crowd and how the crowds are, in my opinion, and in many people's opinion, a very important factor in the enjoyment of these shows. But I thought it was a very good show overall. But I don't blame you for not feeling it or thinking it was a good show, whatever. Recommendations. Now, I don't know if you mean wrestling related or just recommendations for anything to watch. I know this is old, but Tiger King. I don't watch many Netflix shows or movies. I watched Tiger King a couple of months ago. Great show. I'm sure you've probably already seen it by now, but I thought it was a very good show. That's still up on Netflix. I would not recommend like the Big Show or Main Event. I have yet to watch Main Event, the Netflix movie, not the WWE like D show or C show or F show rather. Anyway, I wouldn't recommend those things, but Tiger King on Netflix was great. I recently watched Uncut Gems on Netflix. My brother saw it in theaters months ago, and it recently went up on Netflix here in the States. Great movie. I thoroughly enjoyed it. Again, I don't really take too much time out of my day to watch stuff like that just because I just don't have the time. But if I do, I'm willing to check that type of stuff out. I know RJ recommended The Wrong Missy to me, which is on the other side of the spectrum in terms of like being a comedy movie, not a serious movie, with David Spade. I want to watch that. I just haven't had the time yet. Disney Plus is great. RJ and I talk about this every single week on Wrestle Rant Radio about how there's so many classic movies, new and old, on there worth checking out. For wrestling, the WWE Network has so many great old pay-per-views. So Alexis and I right now are in the process of rewatching all the greatest pay-per-views, in my opinion, from the last 30 years. Now, I started with WrestleMania 3, which to me is really when it all started. So far, we watched WrestleMania 17. That was the first one, really, but that was for a different reason. We're watching them in order now. So we started with WrestleMania 3. We fast-forwarded to 92 for the 92 Royal Rumble pay-per-view. We then went to WrestleMania 10, and then this past weekend, we watched In Your House, Beware of Dog. We watched Survivor Series 1996, and we watched In Your House, Canadian Stampede. All great shows, all well worth watching again. You said not really NXT TakeOver, which I understand. New Japan is coming back on June 15th, I believe. I'm not a big New Japan fan myself. Not that I'm not a big fan of them, it's just I just don't have time to watch the product. They are coming back, I believe, from what I had seen on Twitter, with the New Japan Cup show, I think on June 15th. So if you're a big New Japan fan, you can check that out. They've been out of commission now for many months due to the whole COVID quarantine thing, so that's cool. They're running shows again in a couple of months. AEW I still very much enjoy. I think Dynamite's doing some great work. I really enjoyed Double or Nothing a couple of weeks ago. Fyter Fest next month should be fun too. So whether it be wrestling or otherwise, there is an abundance right now, especially now with more companies putting more movies out on their streaming services for free and whatnot due to the whole current situation. There's so much great content out there to absorb. I love the Marvel stuff. I'm currently in the process of rewatching all the MCU movies in order of when they came out with the Doc Chris Mueller from Bleacher Report. We've been breaking down our movie reviews here on the channel over the last month or so check those out and the movies themselves. There's a lot of great content out there, wrestling or otherwise, worth checking out from WWE Network. You can check it out on Netflix, Hulu, Disney+. I know there's HBO Max now. I'm not a subscriber to that, but that's an option as well. Joe M. from YouTube. In similar fashion to people like Elias, Alexa Bliss, and Murphy, among others, do you think Dominik Dijakovic, Rick Boogs, Damian Priest, Dexter Lumis, Chelsea Green, and Mansoor, 205 Live in his case, will all be examples of the rare group of people who actually have more success on the main roster than in NXT, due to them perhaps being better suited to that environment? That's a great question. You're right. People like Elias, Bliss, and Murphy all won gold. I mean, I guess Murphy won championship gold in NXT, but it was the fucking tag team titles. I mean, the guy was never really positioned as anything special on that show. Whereas when he got to 205 Live, he got to SmackDown, he got to Raw. He's been a star ever since. Former Raw Tag Team Champion. He's beaten Daniel Bryan before, took Roman Reigns to the limit last summer. Former Cruiserweight Champion, one of the longest reigning champions they've had in that brand's short history. He's been doing really well. Elias has yet to win gold outside of the 24/7 championship, but he is obviously way more over now than he ever was in NXT. And then Alexa Bliss, I mean, God's sakes, I mean, look at her. She's like a 5-time champion. Actually, not even a 5-time champion. She's like a 7-time champion. She's held the Raw Women's Championship, 3 times? The SmackDown Women's Championship twice. And now the tag titles twice. In addition to winning the Money in the Bank ladder match for the women 2 years ago. She has done very well for herself, more so than she ever did in NXT. With the people that you mentioned, to quickly break it down, Dijakovic I'm not sold on. Not the fact I'm not a fan of his, as I am. I'm not sold on the idea of him doing better on Raw or SmackDown than he did in NXT. I mean, the people that you mentioned, Murphy, Bliss, Elias I don't think was ever on a takeover. Alexa Bliss never wrestled on a takeover. Murphy had a handful of takeover matches, but they were always in a tag team. I mean, they never really got the spotlight in NXT. Dijakovic has. He's had various takeover matches. He was in the main event of a takeover that I think his team won at War Games last November. He's had some great matches with Keith Lee. The issue with him is that it just wasn't the right time. Because had Keith Lee not been in the midst of this great run as North American champion, he probably would have been champion by now. You know, he's had a lot of good matches and moments in the last year and a half he's been with NXT on TV. He's actually been with the company since late 2017. He got signed in September of 2017. I remember when the news broke, I was like, holy shit, about time, because the guy's great. And then they didn't debut him for another year after that, you know. But he's done really well for himself. I just feel like, yeah, he's a guy that has size on his side, but I'm not sure if he's going to be allowed, like Ricochet. I mean, the guy is amazing. He's one of the best ever. He's one of the best in that company. But they just kind of see him as a spot fest guy to kind of go out there and appease the audience, blah, blah, blah. Could Dijakovic fall in a similar spot to a Ricochet or a Neville that never really get beyond a certain level? He very well may. So I don't really know about Dijakovic. Rick Boogs is an interesting one because he has had, all of 1 or 2 matches on NXT TV? And the guy, I just don't get it. NXT does a lot of things right. But the thing with Rick Boogs, unless he's so tremendously terrible that we're just not seeing it, and he seemed pretty decent in the ring from the few matches I've seen of his on the show. This guy had so much momentum coming out of those few matches he had. What was it, about a year and a half ago? In early 2019 on NXT TV. He got the crowd rocking, the crowd was going nuts for him, and then we've not seen him on the show since. You know, we've seen him in the crowd recently, we've seen him on the WWE PC YouTube channel, but not in the ring wrestling matches on the show. And I know they have a lot of stars there right now, but they should also be building up their own talent. Rick Boogs, I think, is a very popular either a sports athlete or YouTube personality or bodybuilder. I'm not sure where exactly he came from, I forget. But he did not get started in professional wrestling. He just so happens to have this great personality for a pro wrestler that they should be focusing more on. So I don't know if they would call him up. I mean, I know Braun got called up without even having wrestled a televised match before. He had like all of 5 matches under his belt before he got called up in, 2015? The same thing that happened to Boogs. I just don't see it. Braun fit a certain mold. They needed someone big for the Wyatt family. You know, it's not like, oh, let's bring him up and start pushing him into the moon like we did in the summer of 2016. I don't see Boogs getting called up without going through the system first. I mean, some people might say, oh, he's like the next No Way Jose. I think he's better than that, honestly. I think he has more star potential than No Way Jose does. But they got to get him on the show. Damian Priest, again, another guy. I'm not sold on him going to Raw or SmackDown and all of a sudden becoming a top star. He's a lot like Dijakovic, where he's just in the right place at the wrong time, where he probably should have been North American champion by now, but Keith Lee is just in the midst of this great reign at the moment. He's done very well for himself. He's had a couple of great matches so far with Lee. The Finn Balor match on Sunday I thought was terrific, and a lot of people would argue the match of the night for that show. I'm not sold on him doing any better on Raw or SmackDown than he is right now in NXT. I really don't. I know, again, he has size on his side, but that's not always everything. So, like Lars Sullivan, for example, might have been one of those guys that you would say, oh, he might do better on the main roster than in NXT. The guy gets hurt, and then that's the end. That's the last we see of him. It's been almost over a year at this point. Actually, over a year since we last saw Lars Sullivan, I believe, on WWE TV. And it's crazy. So anyway, with Priest, I'm not sold on him. Doing any better there than he would currently in NXT. But I hope he does. Loomis, I like Loomis. We'll see where he goes in NXT. He could very well be Adam Cole tonight and earn himself a future championship title shot. I really hope not. I like Loomis, but he's not championship material. He's not going to be the next NXT champion. God, I fucking hope not. That's just too much, too soon. He's not the right guy for it. But anyway, maybe. Chelsea Green, yes. I'm kind of surprised they're calling her up now. It's not the fact that she doesn't deserve to be in the main roster or shouldn't be on Raw or SmackDown. The issue is, why the fuck would you call someone like that up when they've already called up Bianca Belair in recent months and they've done absolutely nothing with her? She hasn't even appeared on Raw in like over a month. So why would anyone think they would treat Chelsea Green better than Bianca Belair, who was a star in NXT? So, I mean, again, people might say the same thing about Bianca, and yeah, she has all the tools on paper to be very successful, but the company's got to feature her first on the show in order for her to win a championship or do well. I know they're focusing on other people right now, but to focus on Nia Jax, who is fucking terrible, over Bianca Belair is a question mark to me. I don't get that. Chelsea Green, Alexis and I have stated to ourselves, just seeing her on the show and whatever, I think she'd be a great tag team partner for Charlotte Flair. And I'll talk more about Charlotte later. She feels incredibly overexposed. But, I mean, she has gone for the tag titles before with Natalya and Becky. And neither of them were really great partners for her. I think Chelsea Green might be a better partner for her. So I would like to see that. And Mansoor, absolutely. I have no idea why the fuck they're not doing more with Mansoor. He's won so many matches on these Saudi shows. How are they not either featuring more on NXT or at the very least 205 Live? Because the guy is very good. He's not the next NXT champion, but he's also very well spoken too. So the fact they're not doing more with him is very surprising to me, because he's had all this momentum for winning all these matches in Saudi Arabia, and then they proceed to do absolutely nothing with the guy in NXT TV. So yeah, they should probably just call him up and put him on 205 Live, because God knows they need more talent there anyway. FT from Facebook, his first question was, we've seen Charlotte Flair for a whole week show up on all 3 brands, Raw, SmackDown, and NXT, and I felt this was way too much overexposure towards one star alone, in my opinion. Do you agree with JD from NY206, in my personal opinions, that Charlotte is slowly turned into the next Roman Reigns, with WWE's agenda of trying to make her the face of the women's division, but felt unnatural by over-pushing her too much? Also, do you agree that this overexposure will hurt WWE in the long run? Finally, do you feel like the overexposure agenda is because of her being in the Flair family and probably WWE wanting to capitalize on matching her father's success? A very long question for a very simple answer. That being, Charlotte is, as I said earlier, incredibly overexposed. It's not that Charlotte isn't good. It's not a case like where with Nia Jax, who is so fucking bad that she should not be on the show. She should be back down in developmental. Charlotte Flair is every bit as good as either she says she is or the people, the company makes her out to be, whatever. Charlotte Flair is awesome. And she is among, whether people like it or not, the best in the world today. The best in the world? No, I would say that's either Io Shirai or Hikaru Shida, Asuka, or maybe even someone else that I'm not aware of from like Stardom or something over in Japan, because they have some great women's wrestlers over there. It's not that, it's the fact that she should not be on the fact that she was on all 3 shows in one given week is fucking ridiculous, especially at a time where we have the brand split for a reason. The brand split, to me, helps limit overexposure, yet we still have the brand split, kind of, because they kind of make up the rules as they go along. Yet she still appeared in every show in one given week. Fucking why? She made a comment to like ESPN, and again, she's not going to bury the company's creative direction, but she was saying like, oh, they call me overexposed, but I was on SmackDown to help with someone else's story. Then why the fuck were you there? Why does it have to be Charlotte facing Bayley? Why not someone else from Raw? I mean, even if it was Asuka, God forbid, Charlotte does not have to be on every fucking show. She was already, by that point, when she went to SmackDown for 2 weeks in a row, she was already on Raw and NXT. There was zero reason for her to also be on SmackDown. Put Asuka over there. Even Nia, she's terrible, but at least she's not as overexposed as Charlotte is. They gotta, not that they should feature her less, but they gotta feature her less. She should not be on all 3 shows. SmackDown's out of the question. That was a short-lived thing. With NXT, I hope. I guess she could show up tonight and ask Io for a rematch, which I guess down there is still a thing. The automatic rematches for former champions. I guess we could still get Io and Charlotte, and then Io pins Charlotte to retain the title, and that's it. Because I assume, because Triple H said in a conference call or something about how, Charlotte not getting pinned on Sunday is part of the long-term storytelling. All right, is that the long-term storytelling with Rhea or with Charlotte? With Rhea, I guess they want to have her bounce back and redeem herself. I think it would have made more sense to have Io pin Charlotte. But the only reason I could see them doing that is if they have Charlotte come out tonight or next week or whatever and say to Io, you did not pin me. You're not better than me. And then they build to a rematch with those two, which could be really good if given enough time. The last match they had was entertaining, but it never really felt like it got beyond a certain level, and it kind of ended abruptly with a DQ and whatever. I want to see a rematch in NXT TV. I want to see a rematch in NXT TV and see Io win decisively, clean as a sheet, 1, 2, 3, it's over. Charlotte does not always need to be protected. She doesn't always need to be on Raw. She doesn't always need to be on NXT. She doesn't always need to be on SmackDown. She's great, but the more you overexpose her, the less favors it's going to do her. I would say the exact same thing about anyone. AJ Styles, Daniel Bryan, Seth Rollins. It doesn't matter. If they're on all 3 shows, that's way too much. We have the brand split for a reason. Now, to answer your question about the whole Roman Reigns thing, is she the new Roman Reigns? Dude, she's been the Roman Reigns for years now of that women's division. This is not a new thing. Aside from the fact that she flips and flops back and forth between face and heel every other week, she is literally Roman Reigns with a vagina. She is the Roman Reigns of the women's division. And that's not a bad thing. And again, it's the exact same scenario. Roman's not over-pushed anymore or overexposed or whatever. But years ago, he was absolutely overexposed. And he was always in the championship picture when he doesn't need to be. Charlotte, as I was discussing with earlier today with RJ over text, she doesn't always need to be in the title chase on every single fucking brand that she's on. Corey Graves, I think I answered it here on the show, but Corey made this outrageously dumb comment about how Charlotte always needs to be in the championship picture to remain relevant. Which, if he actually believes that, is not good. That's not good. You should not always need to be in the championship chase in order to remain relevant in WWE. That's not good. But he made that comment on his podcast, and maybe he said it to stir shit up, get people talking. I'm sure he did. That was right around the time the podcast started to get people listen to it. I get it. But at the same time, though, that's so stupid. Because as I said to RJ earlier today, they need more women's feuds outside of the championship picture. And they've done a few good ones. And even with Charlotte and Trish, I thought for as long as it lasted, which was all of a month, had a good feud going into SummerSlam last year. Trish Stratus and Charlotte had a very good match, a good simple build. That's a great example of how Charlotte does not always need to be in the championship picture. She actually was off TV for about a month or two last summer. And I'm like, wow, this is really refreshing. And they focused on Bayley in the championship picture. They focused on Becky over on Raw. You don't always need to have Charlotte on the show. Contrary to popular belief, switch those two words around. Charlotte does not always need to be in the championship chase. She may elevate it, she is great, but the fact that she's already, a 12, 13-time champion, whatever the fuck, is completely ridiculous. In 5 years on the main roster, Trish was there for, 6 or 7 years? She held half the amount of championships, it seems like, so I'm just not a fan. I would rather they have her feud with, Shayna's not even on the show right now because she's not on Backlash on Sunday. Maybe they would rather save Shayna and Charlotte for, after Shayna or Charlotte win the championship back, the Raw Women's Championship. But why not that? Shayna and Charlotte, boom, right there. Charlotte does not have to be feuding with Asuka right now. Go back to that program for SummerSlam or beyond. In the meantime, with Charlotte on Raw, you can have Charlotte versus Shayna. Charlotte and Natalya, God forbid, no thanks. What about Charlotte and Bianca Belair? Why not? Wouldn't that make sense? They had that long, sprint with each other in the Rumble, I think. I think it was Charlotte who eliminated Bianca, if I'm not mistaken. They definitely went after each other for a while there, and Bianca was in that match for a very long time. Why not play off of that? And she idolizes Charlotte, too. She's even said that. So again, it's a feud that makes sense, and you could do it over the championship, but I don't want to see that Raw Women's Championship back around Charlotte's waist anytime soon. So in the meantime, just use her in other programs. Have her feud with Bianca. Have her feud with someone else, like a Shayna, like a Bianca. You can have her feud with Rhea if you want, but it doesn't have to be over the championship. So, yeah, she is kind of the Roman Reigns of that division. It's not a slight against Roman. It's not a slight against Charlotte, because they're both very, very good. It's the company for always constantly overexposing them. I very much enjoy Charlotte in her matches. It's very rare that she has a bad match. But they're burning through all these feuds and matches and whatever because they feel the need to always have her on the show. It's ridiculous. Anyway, FD's second question here. With Io Shirai capturing the NXT Women's Championship last weekend at NXT TakeOver in Your House, the championship triumph for Japanese female wrestlers continues after Asuka won the Raw Women's Championship and Hikaru Shida captured the AEW Women's Championship. Do you feel that major wrestling promotions like AEW and WWE have finally shown their own love and care towards Japanese female wrestlers, with them capturing their first major championships, or not first, he said capturing major championships in their respective companies, or are these merely coincidences? Do you see these championship triumphs benefiting the Japanese female wrestling industry, or even major Japanese promotions focusing on women's wrestling like Stardom and Sendai Girls? I've never heard of that. As a whole, in both short and long terms. Finally, do you feel that both Hikaru Shida's and Io Shirai's championship victories are being booked to honor the late Hana Kimura, in your opinion? No, they're not. That's just a coincidence. It was cool to see Io pay homage, pay tribute to Hana Kimura, I think on her gear. A couple of weeks ago in NXT, I thought that was really well. I think it was like the tag team match, I believe. She wrote Hana on her gear, I think, and Morrow made mention of it as well, which I appreciated. I know Dakota paid tribute to Hana in her match on Sunday by dyeing her hair pink, which was cool. But no, I don't, let's give Shida the championship because Kimura just died, and I don't think so at all. But in regards to the first part of your question with Io winning gold, Shida winning gold, is it a Japanese, women's wrestling revolution? It is a coincidence. They're not saying, let's start focusing on the Japanese women in our companies. Rio was the first ever AEW Women's Champion. So it's not like, this is the first time, someone that's not an American held the Women's Championship in AEW. Rio was the first ever AEW Women's Champion. In WWE, Asuka is a multi-time champion on Raw, SmackDown, NXT. So again, it's not like, the first time they've held gold, Kairi Sane, a former NXT Women's Champion. They don't always book these women the best, but it's not a Japanese thing. It's a WWE thing. I think race does, stuff like that does have something to do with it. to an extent, because in their mind it might be like, oh, Asuka can't speak English, so therefore we shouldn't give her the championship. But like I've said before, she's been very successful. So you can't sit here and say, oh, she's been buried. She may not be utilized to the best of her, to her full potential as a badass. And I'm glad Charlotte brought that up on Raw this week, because Asuka feels the farthest thing from being a badass right now. She's not a badass at all. The whole dancing shit, I don't find it entertaining. I don't find it menacing. I just find it really, really dumb. So I really hope she would stop doing it. Anyway, so the whole Japanese women winning championships thing, they shouldn't be giving these people championships just because of where they're from. They should be giving them the championships because they're just fucking good, you know? Io Shirai should have won the championship a year ago. The timing wasn't right with the whole Shayna thing going on at that point. I get it. I'm glad she won the title on Sunday. I was not expecting that. I really didn't. I told this to RJ, but I figured Charlotte would win, LOL. Thankfully, that was not the case, and Io captured the championship. With Asuka, I would have given the belt to Shayna. I think Shayna was more in line for a run than Asuka was, but, Asuka's still very good, and it's better than Nia, so not going to complain. And then with Shida, she is the best women's wrestler in that company. I know people might say, oh, Nyla Rose should have had a longer run. If Rose beats Shida at Double or Nothing, I really don't know what you do with Nyla Rose, because she's already beaten everyone else. She beat Riho, who's not there right now anyway. She beat Statlander. She just beat Big Swole last week on Dynamite. And then we had Shida at Double or Nothing at the last month at the pay-per-view. So if it wasn't Shida taking that championship away from her at that time, I really don't know when else they would have done it or who else they would have had in that spot. Shida is the hot hand right now. I'm really happy they went with her as the new champion because she is very, very good. So it's not like women's wrestling in Japan has always been huge. So it's not like, oh, the championships being on Shirai, Shida, and Asuka is all of a sudden going to create this new resurgence of women's wrestling in Japan. Women's wrestling over there, from what I understand, has always been super, super hot with promotions like Stardom and stuff like that. It's always been amazing over there. Well, even way more so than here in the States. So, they've always done right by the women. I don't think it's going to lead to, you mentioned Stardom. I don't know if you mean is New Japan going to start featuring their own women's division? I don't watch New Japan, but I've never really gotten that sense that they're going to start their own women's division. I know they featured the Stardom women at the Wrestle Kingdom pay-per-view earlier this year, but I think that was a one-off. So, I don't know. I think they should have their own women's division. They don't. That's their prerogative. I think that's the way it's always been over there, so that's maybe why. Doesn't make it right, but whatever. But it is cool to see Shirai as the new NXT Women's Champion, nonetheless. Let's see. His third question here. I am sad that the dream for Velveteen Dream to capture the NXT Championship could fully be over after his loss to Adam Cole at NXT TakeOver in Your House. My question is, do you feel that after his loss, the Velveteen Dream's star power overall took a huge blow, and do you feel that he will never ever capture the NXT Championship even after Adam Cole loses the championship someday? Also, in your opinion, do you consider Adam Cole to be the most dominant NXT champion of all time, as he has reached beyond a full calendar year into his reign? And does this mean he and the Undisputed Era will stick around in NXT for a long time? I see them getting called up by the end of the year. They've been there for 3 years now. I love Undisputed Era and NXT, don't get me wrong, but at some point they got to move on. They have to. I would wait until there's crowds again, just because I think that's a massive opportunity wasted. I know they had McIntyre win the WWE title in front of no fans, but that's not really something you can wait on. They were not going to keep the belt on Brock until the fucking fans return, which may not be for a while. They can hold off on the Undisputed Era call-up, so I'm glad they're seemingly holding off on that. I don't know why you would call up Cole as the NXT champion anyway. But anyway, with Adam Cole as the champion, is he the most dominant NXT champion of all time? Absolutely. The guy's been champion for a year, but not only that, I interviewed Adam Cole a week ago to talk about his favorite matches as NXT champion, favorite moments and whatnot. If you go back and look at every one of these matches this guy has had as champion, he's had almost 9 or 10 successful championship defenses. Literally, almost every single one has been good to great to amazing. The Gargano matches were incredible. The Ciampa match in Portland was fantastic. The Balor match in NXT TV late last year was fantastic. The Matt Riddle match on NXT TV, NXT TV, there we go, back in October was great as well. Even the Jordan Miles match was good. The Velveteen Dream match is not so much, but like the Pete Dunne match was amazing at Survivor Series. The Daniel Bryan, Seth Rollins matches on Raw and SmackDown were fantastic. This guy's had so many good matches, memories, and moments as NXT champion, and has really elevated that championship since NXT went to 2 hours. He's held it the entire time. I really don't know how you can say anyone else has been a better NXT champion than Adam Cole. Like, even as good as Finn Balor was, Finn Balor, the greatest champion they ever had. Yeah, people say that because they correlate that time period with being their favorite in NXT history, or even Neville. I mean, Neville fucking was defending the belt against Titus O'Neil, Brodus Clay. Give me a fucking break. I mean, Neville was having some really good matches, don't get me wrong. The Sammy match was great. The Tyson Kidd match was great. The 4-way was great. But beyond that, the well runs dry. Cole, he's held the championship for a year, but not only that, almost every single championship defense that he's had has been, like, amazing. Not one or two, a lot of them. A lot of them. So I would put him over Balor, who, defended the belt twice against Samoa Joe, and that was it. Kevin Owens maybe once. Apollo Crews once. He didn't really have many championship defenses in the span of, 9 or 10 months. He was champion for a while, but he didn't defend the belt all that often. Cole has defended the belt a lot more often than Balor ever did. So with Adam Cole, gotta go with him as the most dominant and the best, in my opinion, NXT champion of all time. With Dream, he should not have won on Sunday. It does make storyline sense for him to have beaten Cole on Sunday, but he has felt ice cold. And I'll talk about this a little later on. I think John Ritland also asked about this. But Dream has been, ever since he came back, even when there were fans, the guy has just not been the same since he returned. For whatever reason, I don't know if it was a long layoff or what, but the Roderick Strong matches were not that good. The Adam Cole matches have not been that good. The guy has been not really having all these breakout star-studded performances the same way that he was a year ago, 2 years ago, 3 years ago, with Aleister Black and Matt Riddle and all these other people. So anyway, with Velveteen Dream, I'm glad they didn't put the championship on him. No, I don't ever see him becoming NXT champion. At this point, he shouldn't. I think that time passed about a year or two ago, and it's not his fault. The timing just wasn't right. It would have been cool if he won against Ciampa a few years ago, but Ciampa just won the belt, so the timing wasn't really right. At this point, the guy should just be called up, in my opinion. At noob_n_code 1991 from Twitter, their first question was, what are your thoughts on Io Shirai becoming the NXT Women's Champion? I see a ton of potential in her holding the championship longer than Asuka's title run 4 years ago. I'm a big fan of Io becoming the champion. It was the right call. It's long overdue. She should have won the belt a year ago, but better late than never, I guess. There's a lot of matches to be had there for her, which is cool because that division is so stacked. You could do Io and Charlotte again. You could do Io and Rhea again. I mixed the two names there. Shirai and Ripley would be great again. You could do Io and Dakota Kai at some point. Io and Tegan Nox could be really, really good. They have a lot of great women. Io and Mia Yim. Io and Candice. I know they have history. There's a lot of potential matchups there. Should she hold the championship longer than Asuka? I mean, I love Io, but I mean, if the competition is there the same way it was for Asuka or for Shayna, then sure. But I don't want to see them put the belt on Io for a year and a half for the sake of breaking Asuka's record. Shayna didn't even break the record. I mean, she held the championship for as long as she did. She didn't even break Asuka's record. She was about a month or two off. And Shayna held that belt for a very long time. With Shayna, it made sense because it's she's the heel champion. She's dominant. Asuka, same thing. She was undefeated. With Io, she doesn't need to hold the championship for a year. I'm so fucking sick, and I never thought I would say this. I'm so sick of the long championship reigns for the sake of having long championship reigns. Cole's been champion for a year. The Kabuki Warriors were tag team champions for 6 months. Walter's been champion for over a year. Becky Lynch was Raw Women's Champion for over a year. Bayley has been SmackDown Women's Champion for almost a year now. What the fuck is with this resurgence of World Championship reigns? Brock Lesnar a couple of years ago was a 500-day reigning Universal Champion. Why does everyone have to hold the championship for a year? I mean, the New Day were champions for like over a year, a couple of years ago. It is cool in certain respects. Cole's deserved it. New Day deserved it. Brock did not need to be the champion for a year and a half. Becky Lynch probably should have dropped the belt a little sooner than she did. Definitely at WrestleMania. She did not need to be the champion past WrestleMania 36. And that's a fucking fact. I hate the long champion. Everyone has to have a long championship reign. No, they don't. I don't want to see Io break the record. If she does, great. And I think Io is amazing. But don't keep the belt on her and dismantle all the competition in that division just to break the record. I mean, Asuka, yeah, she held the championship for 16 months? But that division was in shambles after she left. Because she demolished literally everybody. The Iconics meant nothing. Ember Moon lost a lot of luster with those losses to Asuka. And Ember Moon really should have beat Asuka at the Brooklyn 3 show, in my opinion. And she didn't, and she felt a lot less special after that. They really had to rebuild Ember Moon beyond that point. Nikki Cross felt like a loser. It was like Asuka and then everyone else. The same thing can be said for Becky Lynch. It was Becky Lynch and then everyone else. I don't want to see that happen again to the EO Championship NXT Women's Division, the EO's Championship reign and the NXT Women's Division. If there's a reason for it, then sure. But if you have all these other talented women, I want to see Tegan Nox get a reign. I don't want to see Io drop it a month from now. But to say, oh, should she break the record? I mean, no. And if the story calls for it, then sure. If there's no one better than Io, then sure. Like with Cole. No one at any point should I say should have beaten Adam Cole for that championship. Maybe if Dream was hotter right now, then maybe. But other than that, Gargano should not have won the belt back from Cole. Riddle, maybe, but they needed to tell the Ciampa story. Ciampa was not the right guy to beat Cole for the championship. It just goes on and on. So anyway, no, I don't want to. I mean, if she holds the championship for 16 months, then great. But don't do it for the simple sake of breaking the record. And not everyone has to break a fucking record. You break the record so constantly it means nothing. At Iwagu91, considering Nia Jax's tendency to accidentally injure someone, if she continues with it, will it get to the point that the female superstars will refuse to work with her until she overcomes that issue? Nah, I don't see that. We have not seen that in such a long time in this company. That sounds like a mentality from like the 80s or even the 90s. I have never heard any stories in the last decade, in the near decade and a half that I've been a fan for, about wrestlers refusing to work with, I mean, at least the women, refusing to work with certain people because they're not safe. Like if Charlotte spoke up and said something, that'd be one thing, but everyone's got to be friendly with each other and walk on fucking eggshells because, you can't speak out. And I get it. I don't want to, condone bullying or politicking or whatever, but with Nia, she's fucking terrible. I mean, she's so bad. I feel like if that was going to happen, it would have happened by now. She's injured so many people. I feel like no one's going to speak up and say, hey, you got to get her off TV. Because even Charlotte Flair is no John Cena. If Cena said about Ryback, oh, this guy's unsafe, get him off the show, then he would be off the show like that. Charlotte is not in that position. As big of a star as Charlotte is, and she is a big star, she's no John Cena. No one in that women's division is. Not even Becky Lynch. So I don't think anyone can say, oh, get Nia off TV, because it's not like Nia's a scrub. She's The Rock's cousin, so of course they're going to want to push her at all costs. If it was someone like that just debuted and she was unsafe, then maybe. But not Nia. No one wants to speak out against Nia. She's fucking terrible. She's awful. Now, I don't see it getting to that point, unfortunately. I wish it would, so they would get her off the show, but I doubt that'll ever be the case. At Iwagu91, second question. I read that Vince McMahon wanted Alex Riley to win Season 2 of the original NXT. Is that true? I mean, I imagine so. I mean, Alex Riley literally had it all. The guy had a look. He was good in the ring. He wasn't great. He had charisma. He was already with The Miz. I mean, look at the two careers. Caval ended up winning. They did fucking nothing with a guy on SmackDown. They paired him to Lay Cool, gave him a one-off Intercontinental Championship match, and that was it. They fired his ass by December. Alex Riley was with the company a lot longer than Caval ever was. I mean, he was with The Miz for a while, so yeah, I would absolutely expect that Alex Riley would have been the guy that Vince was eyeing to win that show, and not Caval. But because they actually did fan voting, that kind of fucked him over, and that's why Caval lasted as long as he did, and then he ended up getting cut a couple months later. So yeah, I could absolutely believe that. This is very obvious, but is it without question that Daniel Bryan is the most successful person to come out of the original NXT? I mean, obviously, I don't think anyone else from NXT Season 1 won a world championship. Season 2, and Bray Wyatt. Bray Wyatt's been very successful, the former Husky Harris. Not as much as Bryan. Bryan has literally won every championship seemingly twice. The guy is, he's a former multi-time world champion, main event at WrestleMania. No one has beaten what Daniel Bryan has accomplished. So that's an easy win for Daniel Bryan. And then his last question here, who do you think is the most successful female rookie of NXT Season 3? Now, the two names that come to mind, Caitlyn won a Divas Championship, but she was gone like a year later, so not Caitlyn. Jamie Keys was like a former ring announcer for them. She was no good. Oksana sucked. Who else did they have on that season? I know they had AJ Naomi, Caitlyn, Jamie Keys, Oksana, and Katrina. The Katrina from Lucha Underground. She didn't do anything in WWE, so it would be between AJ and Naomi. Now AJ, I think more people... It's really tough because AJ's had a bigger impact on the company. As a former Raw GM, one of the longest reigning Divas champions of all time, involved pretty prominently on the show from 2012 up until she retired in 2015. Naomi's also been very successful, though. She's been around for a decade since that show. Former two-time SmackDown Women's Champion, won the WrestleMania Women's Battle Royal a year or two ago. So I'm going to say Naomi is not the most successful. I would go with AJ Lee. Just because... Let's say Naomi retired tomorrow. Who would I induct first into the Hall of Fame? Bullshit aside with AJ being Punk's husband. I'm sorry, AJ being Punk's wife. Excuse me, that's weird. I would induct AJ in a heartbeat. Not that she's the next Trish Stratus. Even AJ's matches weren't the best. Naomi might be a better wrestler than AJ, but I feel like AJ had a bigger impact on the company. For the short time that she was relevant for, Naomi's always been like a second-tier superstar. She could always be more, but she's always been booked as a second-tier superstar. They never really saw her beyond a certain level. They would put the championship on her for a couple of months. She hasn't held the belt in over 3 years. They haven't done a lot with her, so I would say AJ, personally. At RJ_Marceau, Mr. Marceau's first question was, do you think a mid-card women's championship belt should be introduced? I think it could help develop underneath talent if booked correctly. I would swap those tag titles for this in a heartbeat. I don't know if anyone asked about it. Let me look real quickly. Yeah, no one did. So Paige said last night on Backstage that she would really prefer the tag titles meant more. I'm very happy she said this because she is absolutely correct. Those tag titles, I don't care if they're held by Banks and Bayley. I don't care if they're held by Nikki Cross and Alexa Bliss. I don't care if it's the fucking Iconics. It doesn't matter. Those belts mean absolutely nothing. I know they main evented a pay-per-view late last year with Charlotte, Becky, and the Kabuki Warriors. I don't think, aside from maybe that one match, which ended up being not that good, by the way, I don't think I've ever said to myself, oh man, I can't wait for this women's tag team title match. I know the belts have only been around for like a year and a half now, but aside from when they first introduced them, ever since Bayley and Banks dropped them at WrestleMania, to me, they have never felt important. They were a little better around the waist of the Kabuki Warriors than they were the Iconics. The Iconics were terrible. And I really hope they won't win Sunday, but I feel like they will. I fear that they will, I should say. But even now, Sasha and Bayley, it's more about the story with Sasha. I'm glad they won the championships back. Because I really don't care about Alexa Bliss and Nikki Cross. They're a good team, they're over and they're nice, but there's nothing that there's nothing that stands out as special about Alexa Bliss and Nikki Cross. Oh, we're happy to be here. I just don't give a fuck about those two as a team. It's a nice use of Nikki Cross. It's better than doing nothing with the girl, because she's very talented, but I just don't care. With Banks and Bayley, them holding the belts, it doesn't really make me care about the championships anymore. They fucking lost their first match as a team on Monday's Raw. When didn't one of them get pinned? Didn't one of them pin Sasha or Bayley or something? Maybe it was the Iconics. I think it was the Iconics. But they still lost. They still got beat. So, yeah, with the championships being on Banks and Bayley, it furthers their story and extends their storyline through SummerSlam, I would hope. But that's the only reason why I want them as champions. Bliss and Cross just do nothing for me personally. They're a good team, but I just don't care. So, anyway, I know this isn't really about the tag titles. The issue for me is that ideally, yes, women's tag team titles, even a mid-card championship, as you mentioned, RJ, could be a good idea. I've never liked the idea of a mid-card championship for the women because the main women's championships don't even mean that much. So how much more would a mid-card belt mean if the Raw and SmackDown women's championships don't mean as much as they do? Bayley has been a better champion lately. She's been improving as a heel, which is good. Asuka just won the championship, but it's not like I look at either belt as being overly prestigious. Becky lost a decent amount of momentum as champion the further along she went. Bayley has actually been better as champion since she won it, which is good. But if those belts don't feel as important as, like, let's say the NXT Women's Championship, then how much would a fucking random throwaway mid-card belt mean? More championships, and RJ, you can correct me via text if you want. I feel like RJ and I are on different mindsets, wavelengths when it comes to this type of thing, because we've had this conversation before. More championships is not the answer. Now, you might be saying to yourself, well, you were sitting here advocating for a mid-card belt in AEW. Yeah, because they need it. A mid-card belt for the men is different than mid-card belt for the women because they have more men. And yeah, WWE has a decent amount of women, but I don't think introducing a women's mid-card championship would change that at all. I really don't. It's not like Joey Janela means more because there's an AEW TNT title to fight for now. I think it gives people like Cody more of something to do, and it makes sense for the guys because there's more men. That's just the way that it is. Until we get to a point, if we ever get to a point where there's the same amount of women that there are the men, which I don't think we'll ever get to that point, I really don't. Whether you agree that there should be or there won't be, or that there shouldn't be, whatever. Until we get to that point, I really don't see a need for a second mid-card women's championship. Tag titles are different because, it's a bit different because you have tag teams. So it's not the same like, a singles match of the Raw Women's Championship and then a tag team title match. Like, I think tag team titles in theory are a good idea with more teams, but they have no teams. They don't really fully utilize the concept. They haven't appeared in NXT in months. They're never in NXT UK. They switched brands more recently now than they have in a long time. The champions, that is. But I still don't care. And it's the same feuds and matches. I feel like we just saw Bliss and Cross versus the Iconics 6 months ago. Why should I care, personally? So anyway, I don't like the idea at all. I really don't. Giving Liv Morgan a throwaway mid-card belt is not going to make her any more interesting. It's not a matter of giving these women something to fight for. And RJ and I, like I said earlier, we're discussing this earlier via text, that what they should be doing is creating more stories for these women outside of the championship picture. Now, they're not incapable of doing so, because they've done it before. They did it with Nikki Bella and Carmella a number of years ago. And they had actually a really good feud, I thought. They did it with Nikki and Natalya soon after. They had a good feud as well, which I never thought I would say, but they did. They did it with Charlotte and Trish very briefly last year. They could be doing more with the women on those shows without fighting for a championship. So I hate the notion like, there's got to be a championship involved. There really doesn't. I would get rid of those dumbass tag team titles. I think they're worthless. Maybe they can improve upon and make them mean something. Not that it's too late, but like I never sat here and said they need women's tag team titles. Because they've never had an abundance of women's tag team titles or tag teams to begin with. So why would tag team titles solve anything? It really doesn't. It feels like a toy for the Iconics to play with, and that's it. I don't give a fuck about the tag team titles. I wouldn't give a fuck about the mid-card's belt, about a mid-card championship for both brands for the women. They just got to do a better job of making their championships and making the division mean more. It goes back to what I've been saying for a year and a half now. Without Ronda Rousey, they just immediately lost a whole lot of interest in featuring those women. And the 4 Horsewomen are great. They gotta build up more stars beyond them. Asuka is a good start, but Nia Jax is terrible. You gotta start focusing on people like Rhea Ripley, which is why she should have won at WrestleMania. I still think that's the dumbest booking decision they made all year, was having Charlotte beat Rhea. And I don't give a fuck what anyone says. That was a dumb fucking idea that hurt Rhea's momentum significantly. They got to focus on Asuka a bit more, which is nice. She still feels like an afterthought with Charlotte being on Raw, but whatever. Nia's terrible. Focus more on Ruby Riott. Give her a chance. Focus more on Liv Morgan. Focus more on Mandy and Sonya. They're having a good feud over on SmackDown that isn't over a championship. What a fucking concept. Not everything has to be for a championship. I hate that notion. I hate it. And the same goes for the men too. Not everything has to be for a championship. They have a lot more feuds with the men that aren't over titles because they have more men. Why can't they do the same thing with the women? I'm not saying bring up more women. That's the exact opposite of what they should be doing right now. They should be making more compelling stories with the women that aren't about bullying or aren't about whatever. Mandy and Sonya, it's kind of bit about that, but they have a history. They work well together. Sonya's been fucking killing it in their feud. That's a feud I care about. Charlotte versus Asuka Part 10? Not really. Liv Morgan talking about why she's a millennial? Who gives a fuck? Who cares? RJ's second question. Io Shirai winning the NXT Women's Championship was the first time in a long time I was genuinely excited for a title change. What title wins in recent memory got you excited? That's a good question. It wasn't a title change per se. I mean, I was really happy when he won the WWE Championship at WrestleMania. But when McIntyre won the Rumble, just because I wasn't really expecting it, because I really thought they would go with Roman, or like a Cain Velasquez or some dumb shit, I was really happy with McIntyre won. So probably McIntyre, even though it's not a title change. Again, I was happy when it won at WrestleMania, even though I was kind of expecting that. His Rumble win was a bit more unexpected. The Street Profits, which RJ was there for when they won the NXT Tag Team titles in TakeOver last year, that and the Adam Cole win were fucking awesome to witness live. That was a great show. A TakeOver 25 a year ago, great show. RJ was there to witness my markout reactions. I don't know if that's recent memory because it's a year ago. And other recent, I don't really know. Because the Intercontinental Championship, the United States Championship, they don't mean anything. It was cool to see Apollo Crews win the championship, but it's like, the belt means absolutely nothing, so who fucking cares, you know? Io winning was cool. I would probably say either the Street Profits from last year, if not Adam Cole from that same show, if not McIntyre winning the Royal Rumble back in January. At the WrestleGuy Sal from Twitter, his first question was, though they are really over as a face team, how would you feel about the Street Profits aligning with MVP alongside Bobby Lashley? You know, I was thinking about that when they first teased that on Raw backstage a couple of weeks ago. I don't hate the idea, but like you just said, Sal, they're very over as a face team, so that's why I wouldn't do it. If they were floundering and they weren't doing well, I mean, they're the current Raw Tag Team Champions, which is why I wouldn't do it. So, I would keep them their own entity for a while longer. There's no real reason to turn them heel or put them with MVP and Bobby Lashley. MVP having a team to manage would be cool. The Street Profits shouldn't be with them just because they're all black. I mean, I guess that's one thing they have in common, but just because they're all black doesn't mean they should be put with MVP. I know that's not why you were saying that. They would be a good fit on paper, just the timing isn't right. If they were doing nothing and they were floundering and they weren't over, then maybe, but they're doing perfectly fine for themselves right now, so not them. But if not them, then who? You know, Shane Thorne and Brendan Vink? No thank you. The Viking Raiders? No thank you. It just doesn't make sense. They just don't fit that vibe. Again, the Street Profits would be sick, but they just showed up and they're still over his faces, so that's why I say no. Maybe down the road, though. Maybe down the road. Maybe if they lose the tag titles and they go heel, then maybe. You know, not the New Day. They don't really fit the vibe. Not Undisputed Era or a team from NXT. I can't really think of any. I really can't, but I don't hate the idea. I just don't think the timing is right at this moment. Sal's second question. Do you think Edge versus Randy Orton closes out Backlash on Sunday since it is hyped up as the greatest wrestling match ever? Oh, of course. I mean, it's all over the advertising. I am looking forward to McIntyre and Lashley, but since I am expecting Lashley to lose on Sunday, I think they close with Edge and Orton. And even if Orton wins, I mean, it's still the match they've hyped up most for this show. So yeah, I absolutely expect Edge and Orton to go on last. Let's see here. John Ritland from the YouTube machine. Real Honesty with John Ritland on the Twitter, on the YouTube. Check it out. At Reborn Again from the Twitter is what his handle is. His first question was, so in regards to these recent, kind of on a similar subject to the Street Profits from earlier, he said, so in regards to these recent Street Profits and Viking Raiders segments, am I just out of touch because I find them to be ridiculous, annoying, and a bunch of other words I won't use here? To me, this isn't wrestling or even entertainment. So in my opinion, it's completely subjective. I've found a majority of the segments to be entertaining. Some of them I will agree don't click. I mean, I've said as much. Some of them aren't really that funny. Like the basketball one I thought was dumb. They've gotten better, in my opinion, as they've gone along. I like the bowling one. I like the golf one. The decathlon one, it wasn't great. They're very hit or miss, in my opinion. I mean, again, I talked to Montez Ford about it a couple of weeks ago. The interview is up right now on Wrestle Rant Radio from last week. But we discussed about how it's really allowed them to showcase their personality more, which is a plus, which I like. I mean, the Raiders don't really... I mean, I guess they might need it. I don't know. But anyway, I've liked the segments by and large. I can totally understand why you would find them to be dumb or whatever. That's not really something I would sit here and say, like, oh man, how do you not like this? Like, again, I totally get it. I'm more of an entertainment person. You said it isn't entertainment, and I completely get that. For me, I find it mildly entertaining. So I'm not going to sit here and complain about it. Because I don't hate the segments. I don't love the segments. I've found them to be enjoyable. I've enjoyed them on the whole. But I can totally understand why people wouldn't like them, though. His second question: I know you don't watch New Japan Pro Wrestling much, but after they've been off for 3 months, what are your thoughts on them running some shows with no fans and then gradually bringing crowds back over the coming months? I like it a lot. People have really missed New Japan from what I could gather. I mean, it's one of the best promotions out there, according to many people who watch it. So I could see why people would miss it a lot. It's cool they're running shows again. I wasn't sure if there would be fans there. I didn't think so. So you're actually the first person to confirm to me that there will be no fans until they start to slowly introduce fans back into the shows at some point. I wasn't sure because I checked out the press release, and unless I missed something, and it said no, they made no mention about how there would or would not be fans. Now, I guess if there were fans, they would put tickets on sale, which they haven't, and the show's coming up in a week from now. But they're making the most of a bad situation, which I appreciate. And, so it's cool they're running more shows again. People have really missed the product, if it's safe to do so, which I assume it is. If WWE's doing it and AEW's doing it and Impact's still doing shows, then why not New Japan? Unless it's much worse over there than it is here, which I don't get the sense that at all. I think it was actually worse there first before it hit here. But it sounds like they're in the clear, like not that it's completely gone, but it sounds like they're on the back end of it as we are as well, which is good. So, I'm glad that they're running shows again. I might not be able to check any of them out, but it is cool they're doing the New Japan Cup, and many people are excited to see them back, and rightfully so. They are, as I said earlier, one of the best promotions out there to watch. And his third question: is it just me, or was the Adam Cole versus Velveteen Dream feud as cold as the Arctic? Both are good enough workers to make the most of it, if not any feud entertaining, but it just didn't catch fire in my opinion. I think I said this earlier, but the feud fell flat for me when it really should have been so much more. I mean, Velveteen Dream was gone for months. He had his North American Championship by Adam Cole. Adam Cole cost him the championship back in September. Thanks to his interference, Roderick Strong won the championship. So there's a natural story there. It makes sense, but they just don't have great chemistry in the ring. The matches were decent. They were not like Matt Riddle level, Pete Dunne level, and that's not just because there's no fans. Cole could go out there and have a really good match with a lot of different people. Velveteen Dream, for whatever reason, is just... and Dream's great too. They just don't have great chemistry. And maybe it's because there's no crowds right now, and that's why Dream feels a lot colder than he ever has before in NXT's history in the 3 years he's been there for. I don't know exactly. But I'm just not... I just wasn't feeling the feud, so I'm glad Cole retained. I think if Dream won, that would have been a mistake. It would have been nice to see Dream as NXT champion after all the years that he's been on that brand for. But with no fans, it just would not have been the same. So I'm glad that Adam Cole retained. At Time Bomb Zone from Twitter: if New Japan and AEW have a partnership, what cross-brand matches would you like to see? I mean, literally, Okada versus anyone. I mean, Okada and AEW would be surreal. I don't really follow New Japan much, so I can't say, like, oh, this guy and that guy. Excuse me. I don't know if they ever did Okada and Moxley. Were they building that at some point and they just never did it? I don't remember. I feel like I heard about them building to that match at some point, and then COVID happened, so they didn't. I don't remember. Maybe they just teamed. But either way, I think Okada and Moxley would be sick. Okada versus, again, really anyone would be awesome in AEW. I don't really know. Ibushi and Cody again would be cool, because Ibushi owns a victory over Cody. So Ibushi coming in and saying, hey, I own a victory over you, I want a shot of your AEW TNT title, would be fucking sick. because Ibushi is awesome. Ibushi versus Omega, given their history and chemistry and, friendship and whatever, would be fucking sick. I'm trying to think of who else. Not really sure. Maybe Juice Robinson, same thing, owns a victory over Cody, so why not? You can answer the open challenge. So, yeah, I would love to see a formal partnership between the two promotions. I don't know how close we are to getting that, especially now with the whole COVID quarantine situation happening. But at some point, I would love to see it. His second question, who do you see beating Adam Cole for the NXT Championship, and should it happen on the June 1st episode of NXT, the year to the day since he won the NXT Championship? Well, I don't know if you own a calendar, my man, but it's already June 10th. So June 1st is already passed. We are well past that point. Otherwise, it would have been cool, but I don't know why you would ask that when it's already June 10th. And not only that, but June 1st fell on a Monday, not on a Wednesday. Putting that aside, who do I think will beat Adam Cole for the championship? I'm about to write about this, but I believe Keith Lee. I think Keith Lee as NXT champion would be awesome. And I know you're probably going to ask, he's the North American champion. How would that make sense? Build to a title for title match. Keith Lee's been a great North American champion. Adam Cole's been a great NXT champion. They've never faced off one-on-one formally in NXT. They may have had a match in that Worlds Collide show about a year and a half ago. That's it. I think that would make sense. Keith Lee's a big star anyway. So why not? In my opinion, why not? So I think Keith Lee is the best person for the job. You could say Karrion, heel versus heel, doesn't make sense. Ciampa, been there, done that. Gargano, been there, done that. Who really even is there? Dexter Lumis? No thanks. So I would say Keith Lee. Could you see Angel, Garza, and Zelena Vega turning on Andrade if he loses at Backlash? Yeah, absolutely. I could see that. They're already teasing tension between Garza and Andrade anyway. Maybe Andrade breaks away from them and goes face. Who knows? But I wouldn't hate that. A Garza-Andrade feud could be really, really good. At E13A from Twitter, how big of a star would you say Charlotte Flair is? As I said earlier, a big star. Not as big as, the issue is that Trish was a much bigger star just because she came up at a time where there really were no great women's wrestlers, and it was just a different time. But she was also I don't know if she was in Playboy, but she was doing stuff like that, and it was just a different time. Charlotte, she is a very big star. I don't care what anyone says about Charlotte. She is great. She's had a lot of amazing matches. I know the championship reigns are completely out of control, but, in the ring, she's awesome. She's always on the show. She's positioned as, the female face of that company outside of Becky Lynch, who can't be right now because she's going to be gone for a while due to getting pregnant. But she's a big star. She's not a household name where I would ask someone, do you know who Charlotte Flair is? And they probably have no clue. Not as big of a star as a Ronda Rousey, but definitely the biggest star that they have on that roster. Bigger than Bayley. I don't know about bigger, probably bigger than Becky, just because Charlotte's been on top longer. Definitely bigger than Sasha or Asuka or anyone else. She's been on ESPN covers and been on, stuff like that, so. And she's also Ric Flair's daughter, and people know who Ric Flair is. So, she's a pretty big star. Final 3 questions from @Scarlet1 from Twitter. First question was, best and worst of the Wednesday Night Wars, number 34. Not much worse. I didn't really think anything was too weak from Dynamite. The only thing I didn't care for from NXT was the Santana Garrett-Aaliyah match. I like Santana Garrett, but I just don't care. The match itself was all about Aaliyah winning, and she lost, but it was about whether she would win and join Robert Stone and blah, blah, blah. I just don't care. I really just don't give a fuck. So that was the worst of NXT. Otherwise, the Maverick Phantasma match in the main event was fantastic, with Phantasma winning and the whole Maverick story, him getting a contract was cool. Breezango coming back was a cool moment. Was not expecting that. The Breezango Undisputed Era, Oney Lorcan and Danny Burch match was good. The Prime Target videos building up the TakeOver matches was awesome. Those videos were great. And then from Dynamite, I thought Jericho and Cabana had a good match. I thought the FTR interview wasn't must-see, but it was good. It was enjoyable. I thought the best thing on that entire show was Cody and Jungle Boy. I thought they had a great match in the main event for that TNT title. Their next question, what's next for Johnny Gargano and Tommaso Ciampa? Do you think they'll really stay in NXT forever? I don't. I think there's going to come a point where they will get called up to the main roster, and it'll be that much more of a surprise because people aren't expecting them to get called up. So I'm going to say they will eventually. Maybe not anytime soon, but they will down the road. But what's next for them in the interim? I expect the Ciampa-Gargano feud to continue. I'm sorry, Ciampa and Cross feud to continue. And hopefully if they have a second match, Karrion Kross wins that too. Keep the guy going strong. Why do 50-50 booking with these guys, you know? For Gargano, same thing. I feel like him and Lee might continue to feud, and he might be the guy to take that title off of Lee. I still believe that. It just may not be like at the TakeOver on Sunday, as I figured it might have been. It may be on an upcoming episode of NXT. It might be the next TakeOver. Who knows? But yeah, I think Gargano and Lee continues. If not, then I really don't know what you do with Gargano because he just went heel, and now he's lost. Maybe you can have him feud with Velveteen Dream. That's not really a formal feud we've seen before. They've had a couple of matches against each other. I think 3 matches on the show, on TV, but never a formal feud. So that's an idea too. But I do expect Lee and Gargano to continue, as well as Cross and Ciampa. And final question for the day, also from @Scarlet1, is Chris Jericho versus Mike Tyson a good feud for AEW? I mean, it's not a feud I'm sitting here clamoring to see. But if anyone can make it work, it is Jericho. And the thing with Jericho, and I've said this before, the pros and cons of the Jericho-Tyson feud, I talked about it on Wrestle Rant Radio. A couple of weeks ago, the clip is up here on the channel under Wrestle Rant Radio excerpts. But it gets them, I can't even say, it's going to get the major mainstream publicity. Because the guy, Tyson, was on Dynamite, and I read the next day it got like very little buzz. And I know there's a lot more going on right now beyond wrestling with what's going on in the world. But it just did not do well in like Google search terms and didn't trend on Twitter. I think it might have been, I don't know. It just did not do as big as they were expecting. It didn't make a huge rating for Dynamite last week, I don't think. Not that he was ever advertised to appear. But nonetheless. But it could still be good. Tyson is a wrestling fan. He's been involved with wrestling before. I'm not a big fan of the celebrity stuff that wrestling does, in WWE specifically. AEW, they can have Jericho feud with the Orange Cassidy thing they're doing right now. I mean, it's not going to elevate Orange Cassidy, but it is fun. They'll probably do that at Fyter Fest, and probably Tyson and Jericho at All Out. But does Jericho lose again? Because he lost at Revolution. He lost at Double or Nothing. Is he going to lose again at All Out? That's the question I have. So, I don't know if it's a good feud, but I'm not stoked that they're doing it. They do have history from 10 years ago, blah, blah, blah. But if they are going to do it, I do expect Jericho to make the most of it and make it entertaining if nothing else. So we'll see how it pans out. And that's going to do it, guys, for today's episode 341 of #AskGSM for Wednesday, June 10th, 2020. Thank you guys, as always, for sending in questions to the show. You can continue doing so by tweeting me on the Twitter machine at WrestleRant with the hashtag AskGSM. Find me on Facebook at facebook.com/Graham.gsm.Matthews. Leave a comment on the post I usually put up on Tuesday nights, if not on the wall itself. And last but certainly not least, drop your question down below in the comment section on this very video, and I'll include your question in next week's edition. So as I said earlier, sometimes I don't always get notified if you drop a question or comment rather on these videos, and not just these videos, but any of my videos. For whatever reason, I'm not getting notified by YouTube, so that's odd. That's a YouTube issue. But I will go back and check these videos anyway, just to make sure there either are no comments or that there are questions. So I'll make sure to double check with that going forward, so no one's questions get left out. That being said, guys, have a great rest of your week. I'm Graham GSM Matthews. Be sure to like the video, drop a comment, share the video, and subscribe to the channel for more daily content, and I'll catch your ass down the road.